The docking bay of the Dominion warship was always loud, always filled with the echo of metal boots and the humming of powerful energy coils. But today, the atmosphere felt different, stricter, heavier, almost ceremonial. Commander N stood at the front of her elite warriors, her armor shining like a blade dipped in moonlight. She never allowed her posture to slack, not even for a moment. Strength was the language of her people, and she spoke it fluently. Across from her, the human delegation entered the bay. Elias Ward, a young engineer with too much curiosity and not enough caution, followed behind his captain. His eyes moved everywhere, walls taller than buildings, alien symbols glowing like cold fire, soldiers watching with unblinking eyes. He tried to walk confidently, but the ship itself was overwhelming. Everything felt bigger than him. His heart thumped wildly. Don't embarrass yourself, just walk straight. Don't trip, don't stare too much. But the station trembled unexpectedly. It was a light shake, nothing dangerous, just a docking thruster adjusting. No warrior reacted, not even with a blink. Elias, however, lost his balance. His foot slipped forward. His hands flew out as he tried to catch himself. He aimed for the air, desperate to avoid falling flat on his face in front of two militaries. He did not catch the air. He caught something else. His palm brushed against the curved side of Commander's armored hip plate. The entire docking bay froze. Soldiers turned sharply, their faces hardening like drawn blades. Human officers stiffened in shock. Even the hum of machines suddenly felt quieter. His head snapped toward him, her eyes glowing behind her dark visor. She stared down at Elias with the intensity of a storm trapped inside steel. No one dared to breathe. Then her voice cracked through the silence. "How dare you touch my armor, human?" Her tone was sharp, powerful, and filled with insult, not the personal kind but the cultural kind. Among the touching a warrior's battle plate was not a small mistake. It was a symbol of equality, a challenge, a declaration of standing side by side in strength, and humans were certainly not recognized as that. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. "I am so sorry," he blurted out. "I didn't mean to, I lost my balance, I swear I wasn't." His words collapsed under his own panic. His legs felt weak. His captain shot him a horrified look, as if silently screaming, "You've ruined everything, Elias." But stepped forward, towering over him. Her shadow swallowed his. He thought this was it. He expected to be dragged away, or shouted at again, or humiliated further before everyone. But didn't move to attack. She didn't reach for her blade. She simply stared at him too long, too intensely. Something flickered behind the anger in her eyes. Surprise, confusion, something else entirely. Elias couldn't tell. Her soldiers watched her, waiting for her command. Humans held their breath. Both sides felt the tension like a thin wire stretched too tight. Finally spoke again. But this time, her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was unsettled. "You touched the battle plate of a commander," she said slowly. "Do you understand the weight of that action?" Elias shook his head helplessly. "I really didn't know, I'm sorry." He looked down, ashamed, bracing for punishment. But then took one step back. A sign of restraint. A sign of reconsideration. Her visor tilted downward as if examining him more carefully. She seemed to be searching for something in his expression, truth, guilt, perhaps even fear, and she found only sincerity. Her posture shifted just slightly, but enough for her soldiers to notice. The sharpness in the air softened, the tension loosened by a thread. "Escort him to an observation room," she ordered one guard. Her voice was calm again, but not cold. "No harm, no punishment. I will speak with him myself." Elias' heart pounded harder. She would speak with him, alone. He had no idea that this single mistake, this accidental touch, would change his entire life. And had no idea that the human she confronted today would become the human she trusted more than anyone in the galaxy. Elias Ward sat on a hard metal bench in the observation room, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The hum of the ship's engines and the occasional hiss of the airlocks were the only sounds. He had never felt so small in his life. Every second that passed made the memory of the docking bay flash in his mind, glowing eyes, the silence of the soldiers, the cold edge of her voice. "How dare you touch my armor, human?" He ran a trembling hand through his hair. He knew he should feel angry at himself, but instead he felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. There was something about her, the way she carried herself, unshakable and commanding, yet somehow alive in a way that humans didn't always encounter. He had always thought of aliens as distant, but she seemed to exist in a world where every movement carried weight, where honor and pride were not just words but laws. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Elias flinched, expecting a guard, but instead it was her, Commander N herself. She moved into the room, removing her helmet with deliberate grace. Her violet eyes, larger than any human's, met his immediately. There was no fury now, only a quiet intensity that made him shift nervously. "Sit up straight," she said, her voice softer than in the docking bay, yet still full of authority. "Do not shrink away from me." Elias straightened, trying not to tremble. I am very sorry, Commander," he said, words tumbling out quickly. "I didn't mean to. I lost my balance." I raised a hand, halting him. "I know what you mean. The accident is clear. I am aware of your intentions." Her eyes studied him as if she were weighing each word, each thought, each heartbeat. But in culture, touching a commander's battle plate is significant. It is not merely physical contact. It is a declaration, a challenge. Even if accidental, it cannot be ignored. Elias swallowed hard. "I had no idea, I swear. I was only trying to regain my balance. I never intended offense." A silence stretched between them. Elias could hear his own pulse in the quiet room. He noticed for the first time the subtle tension in her shoulders, the slight narrowing of her eyes, and something he could not name, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even curiosity. "You speak truth," said at last. "I can see it. Humans are straightforward in ways we are not. It is difficult to always understand your intentions." Her gaze softened slightly, just enough to make Elia's chest lift with relief. "Yet you must learn our customs. You will not always be excused by honesty alone." "I understand," Elias replied earnestly. "I want to learn. I don't want to make mistakes like this again." Regarded him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable yet not cold. Then almost imperceptibly she nodded. "Very well. I will report this as an accident. No punishment will be applied. But you must remember this lesson, human, not only for yourself but for those around you. Your ignorance could endanger more than just you." Elia's shoulders slumped in relief. "Thank you, Commander. I promise I will be careful." Her eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. There was a quiet intensity in that gaze that made his stomach twist in a way he had never experienced before. She turned her head slightly, and the faintest curve of a smile appeared on her lips, but it vanished almost immediately, replaced by the stoic command that defined her. "Leave the room now," she said. "Return to your duties. You may study the customs of the later. We will speak again." Elias rose, nodding quickly. His legs felt like jelly, but he forced himself to walk steadily toward the door. As he opened it, he glanced back once. Was watching him, her hands resting lightly on her belt, her eyes holding something he could not yet name. He left the room, heart pounding in ways he couldn't explain. For the first time in his life, he felt the strange mixture of awe and fear that humans rarely experience with other species. But beneath that fear, something warmer stirred, an unspoken connection, a curiosity about this alien commander who had glared at him with fury moments ago, and yet now seemed different, almost human in her subtle gestures. And standing alone in the observation room felt it too. The weight of a human presence, so fragile, so unassuming, yet somehow stirring something within her she could not define. A disruption of her discipline, her calm, her certainty. A hint of vulnerability she had not permitted herself in decades. Neither of them spoke it aloud, but both understood. The accident had changed more than just the air in the docking bay. It had begun something far more powerful, an unexpected bond, delicate yet undeniable, ready to grow in ways neither could yet predict. The next morning, Elias arrived at the engineering deck, trying to focus on his work, but he couldn't shake the memory of the previous day. Eyes, sharp and commanding, haunted him. He had barely slept, replaying the docking bay incident and their tense conversation. The human engineers whispered behind his back, some snickering, others worried. Elias ignored them. Nothing mattered more than staying out of trouble and proving he could be competent, not just in engineering, but in understanding the alien culture that seemed impossible to predict. Footsteps echoed across the metal floor. Elias looked up and froze. Commander was walking toward him, armor polished, stride purposeful, helmet tucked under one arm. She stopped a few feet away. "You will train with me," she said. The tone was not a request. "Train?" Elias asked, blinking. I'm an engineer, I don't." "Your hands are always near things they should not touch," interrupted. "And you will learn how a warrior moves, stands, and greets. It is not just tradition. It is survival. Even the smallest mistake could endanger the crew." Elias swallowed. He had no choice. "I understand, Commander." Led him to a quiet practice hall. It was enormous, with polished floors that reflected the bright overhead lights. Sparse equipment lined the walls, but the space itself was intimidating. She gestured to the center. "Stand," she commanded. "Mimic me." For the next hour, Elias tried to follow her movements. Every step, every hand motion, every subtle tilt of her body held meaning. At first, he stumbled constantly, misplacing his feet, overextending his arms, and forgetting the disciplined posture. Eyes followed him like a hawk, correcting him with precise words. "Not like that," she said, adjusting his stance. "Your center is unstable. Focus. Breathe. Humans are too chaotic." Elias' face burned. "I'm trying." "Try harder," she said. Her voice was calm but firm, and it carried an authority that made the air around them tense. Halfway through the session, Elias lost his balance again, tripping on the polished floor. Instinctively, he reached out, moved faster than he could think. Her hand closed around his wrist, steadying him in a single motion. Their eyes met. The distance between them seemed to shrink, and for a moment, neither spoke. Elias could see the flicker of something unusual in her violet eyes, a subtle softness that contrasted with her usual intensity. He felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. "You are reckless," said finally, withdrawing her hand. "And you're very fast," he replied, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer immediately. She simply turned away, adjusting her stance as if to hide her reaction. Elias noticed, though. There was a slight hesitation in the way she moved, a brief pause that betrayed the flicker of amusement, or perhaps curiosity. They continued training. Hours passed and Elias began to improve. He stumbled less, moved more confidently, and started understanding the rhythm and discipline of protocol. Watched him, correcting, guiding, occasionally stepping close enough that Elias could feel the heat of her presence. By the end of the session, sweat soaked his shirt and his muscles ached. But Elias smiled, exhausted yet exhilarated. He had survived the training. He had not failed. Observed him silently for a long moment. Then she spoke in a lower tone, almost a whisper. "You have potential, human, more than I expected." Elias' heart skipped. "Thank you, Commander." Her eyes held his for a beat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement that went beyond words. It was the first time Elias sensed that their connection might be more than commander and engineer. A strange bond was forming, fragile and unexpected, built on respect, trust, and a spark of something he did not yet understand. As he left the practice hall, Elias glanced back. Posture was stern again, commanding as ever, yet something in her stance had shifted, just slightly, a recognition that humans, despite their clumsiness, could rise to the standards of the and for that brief session left her unsettled in a way she had not experienced in decades. She had always been in control, disciplined, untouchable. Yet this human, so small, so fragile, had challenged her calm, disrupted her focus, and sparked a curiosity that refused to be ignored. The training session was over, but neither of them could deny it. Something important had begun. Something neither had expected, and both would soon realize was far stronger than simple discipline or protocol. By the fourth day aboard the tension in the ship had grown like an invisible storm. Humans whispered quietly in the corridors, exchanging glances as they tried to interpret the rigid and unfamiliar customs of the. Elias felt their eyes on him constantly, as if they expected him to fail at any moment. The docking bay incident, though officially marked as accidental, had already become the subject of hushed rumors. Even the soldiers, disciplined and stoic, kept a measured distance. Some observed him with suspicion, others watched him with quiet curiosity. Elias tried to ignore it, immersing himself in technical schematics and repair logs, but it was impossible. Every glance, every subtle gesture from the crew reminded him of the fragility of his position. Commander, however, seemed unmoved, at least on the surface. She moved through the corridors with the grace and authority of a born warrior, her armor gleaming under the artificial lights, and her gaze sharp, assessing everything. But Elias had begun to notice small differences, subtle shifts in her demeanor when she looked at him. She softened her stance briefly in the practice hall, lingered for a second longer than necessary when correcting him, and occasionally allowed her voice to drop in a tone he had not heard from her in decades. Elias found himself pulled toward her presence, unable to resist the fascination and the tension it created. It was not merely respect he felt, though there was plenty, but something deeper, something electric in its subtlety. Later that day, he was alone in the engineering bay, recalibrating a series of energy conduits when entered. She moved silently, her steps echoing softly against the metallic floor. Elias froze, instinctively standing. "You have been performing well," she said, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of caution. "Yet you must be careful," Elias warned. "Not everyone aboard this ship will accept you in my proximity." Elias frowned. Because of the accident? His eyes narrowed slightly. She was not one to waste words. "Partially," she admitted, "but mostly because you are different. Humans do not follow our ways. They do not understand the weight of discipline or the sacredness of proximity to command officers. Some soldiers believe your presence near me is inappropriate." Elias' stomach tightened. He had always imagined danger from outside threats, raiders, hostile species, disasters, but he had never considered it could come from misunderstanding within the crew itself. "So what should I do?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Learn," she said simply. "Learn everything about my people, their customs, their expectations, their signals. One misstep could be dangerous, not only for you but for those around you." She paused, studying his face. "And understand this, I am not one to hide my thoughts. If you are to remain near me, you must be aware of the challenges. Humans are unpredictable, and unpredictability is dangerous." "I will do my best," Elias said sincerely. "I don't want to cause trouble, I just want to understand." His eyes softened briefly, a flicker of something almost like concern passing over her features. "It is not enough to survive on skill alone. You must comprehend the world in which you have been placed. Only then will you be safe, human. And perhaps, only then will you earn the respect of my people." Elias nodded, absorbing every word. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but beneath it, a small spark of hope ignited. This warning, though stern, was also guidance. Was not punishing him. She was teaching him, offering him a chance to rise beyond his human limitations. He noticed the way her hands rested lightly on her belt, the subtle way her gaze followed him, and something in his chest fluttered. She was fierce, unyielding, and terrifying, but she was also showing him a sliver of trust. For the moment lingered too. She had spent decades relying only on herself, commanding with certainty and strength. But this human, so fragile, so untrained, so wildly honest, had unsettled her in ways she had not anticipated. He challenged her discipline without intent, disrupted her calm without malice, and yet drew her attention with an unspoken honesty that no had ever shown her. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, glancing back. "Be careful, human," she said quietly, almost a whisper meant only for him. "Not everyone will see your intentions as I do." Elias watched her go, a strange mix of fear and admiration twisting in his chest. He understood the danger, but he also understood that this warning, this rare glimpse of vulnerability, was not just caution. It was an invitation. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that accepting it would change both of their lives forever. Night fell across though in space, darkness was relative, swallowed by the endless void outside the reinforced glass walls. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, almost comforting, yet Elias Ward felt a strange tension in his chest. He was alone in the engineering deck, recalibrating a series of energy conduits, trying to lose himself in the technical details and avoid thinking about the rumors circulating through the crew. The warnings had given him earlier lingered in his mind like a shadow. "Not everyone will see your intentions as I do." A sudden alarm cut through the silence. Red lights flashed, and a loud siren echoed through the corridors. Elias froze, heart hammering. Emergency protocols flooded his memory, but panic made him fumble with the controls. A blast rocked the deck. Sparks flew from the walls. Smoke began to curl toward the ceiling. Elias stumbled, coughing, as the metal floor vibrated beneath him. From the corridor beyond, he heard alien voices, harsh, guttural, hostile. Raiders had breached the perimeter. His breath caught. He knew the schematics of the engineering deck, but knowing and surviving were different things. Weapons and defenses could only do so much, and he was exposed. He ran toward the nearest bulkhead for cover. A blast tore through the floor nearby, sending debris skidding dangerously close to him. He stumbled backward, and his mind raced with the worst-case scenarios. The raiders were closing in. He could see them at the end of the corridor, their weapons aimed at him. "Human engineer," one growled, "you are coming with us. Your ship will pay for your return." Elias' knees shook. He had no chance alone. Panic gripped him like a vice. Then a roar cut through the chaos. The sound was not human, not mechanical. It was the sound of pure determination. A shadow blazed across the corridor. En charged forward, her movements a blur of speed and precision. Her blades flashed under the emergency lights, striking with a force that shattered the raiders' weapons and sent sparks flying. "Move," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stay behind me." Elias barely comprehended the scene before him, fought like a storm incarnate. Two raiders fell to the floor, disabled. Another raised its weapon, aiming at Elias, but she stepped between them in a heartbeat. Her armor shone in the flashing lights, and her violet eyes blazed with focus. "Do not touch him," she growled, a command that carried the weight of authority and something deeper, something personal. Elias crouched, frozen, heart racing as she engaged the raider with precise strikes. Sparks flew, metal clashed, and the smell of scorched circuitry filled the air. Time seemed to slow. Every second stretched but never faltered. She moved with a fluidity that Elias had only glimpsed during training, unpredictable, unstoppable, and utterly fearless. Finally, the last raider fled when reinforcements from the ship's security arrived. Silence fell again, punctuated by the hiss of the ship's safety systems. Elias sank against the wall, coughing, shaking, and utterly exhausted. Knelt beside him, her armor scorched in places but intact, and she studied him closely. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice softer now, less formal, almost worried. "Just shaken," Elias admitted. Why did you risk yourself like that?" Her eyes flicked away for a moment, then returned to his. "Because a warrior protects those who matter," she said, her words carrying a weight that went beyond discipline or duty. Ilya's chest tightened. He had never felt so small, so grateful, yet so connected. I don't want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," replied, though her gaze softened in a way she had never allowed before. "And now you must understand fully why my warnings were not idle words. Danger comes from outside, and from within. Trust and understanding must coexist with skill, or lives are lost." Elias nodded slowly, still trembling. He had seen her strength, and he had felt her protect him in a way that no human had ever done before. And somewhere deep inside, both of them realized that this incident had changed the balance between them. The human engineer, once clumsy and uncertain, had survived, and the alien commander, once unshakable and solitary, had revealed a rare and guarded part of herself. For Elias, the memory of her violet eyes and the sheer force of her presence would remain forever. For the knowledge that she had fought, not for protocol or honor alone, but for a human, stirred something she could not yet name. The raid was over, but the connection between them had only begun. The had returned to its quiet rhythm, though the echoes of the raid lingered in every corridor. Smoke cleared from the engineering deck, sparks faded from scorched walls, and the distant hum of engines felt steadier, calmer. Yet Elias Ward could not find peace. The adrenaline still thrummed in his veins, his hands shaking slightly as he recalibrated the last damaged conduits. Every sound, every shadow, reminded him of the moment the raider had aimed at him, and the moment had placed herself between him and danger. He had thanked her repeatedly in his mind, but words felt too small, too inadequate. How could he express the enormity of what she had done? How could he tell her that in that instant, when she moved like a living storm, he had seen not only her strength but also her willingness to trust, to protect, to care? The door hissed open. Elias looked up, heart tightening. Stepped in, her armor slightly marked from the battle but her posture as commanding as ever. She walked toward him, her boots echoing softly, and paused a few feet away. "You have performed well today," she said, her tone devoid of the usual reprimand. "You remained composed under threat, followed instructions, and, importantly, you survived." Elias managed a weak smile. "I couldn't have done it without you, Commander. You saved my life." His violet eyes studied him closely. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she removed her gauntlets, revealing hands from countless battles. She extended one toward him. "Come closer," she said. Elias hesitated. It was unusual for her to show this level of intimacy, even in a safe space, but he obeyed, stepping forward. She guided his hands to the conduit they had repaired together. "Observe," she instructed. "Feel its vibrations. Notice its energy flow. Humans often overlook what is beneath the surface. Strength is not only in the body, it is in perception, in understanding." Elias nodded, following her instructions carefully. His hands moved alongside hers, and he felt a strange warmth, not from the energy conduit but from the closeness of the commander. Her presence was overwhelming, yet comforting in a way he had never known. After a while her hands, leaving him to work alone. Elias looked up, and for the first time he saw something more than discipline in her gaze, something personal, something fragile yet resolute. "Today you proved something," she said quietly. "Not only your skill, but your capacity to endure, to learn, to adapt. Humans are unpredictable, yes, but there is potential in that unpredictability. You can grow." Elias swallowed. "Thank you, Commander. I will keep learning. I won't let you or your people down." Her eyes softened and she stepped closer, closer than she usually allowed anyone. "I do not make idle statements, human. What you have done today, it matters to me. More than protocol requires. Remember that. Survival is more than rules, it is trust, and I trust you." The weight of her words struck him. He had never experienced a connection like this. Not with humans, not with anyone. A shiver ran through his body, not from fear, but from the intensity of the bond forming between them. Elias wanted to say something, anything, to express the gratitude and the strange admiration stirring in his chest, but words failed. Instead, he nodded, feeling the electricity of unspoken understanding pass between them. Gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Return to your quarters now, rest. You will need strength for tomorrow for everything that comes next. Elias watched her leave, her armor catching the dim light, each step measured, precise, yet carrying an energy he could not ignore. Alone, he allowed himself a deep breath. His heart was pounding, but not just from fear or adrenaline. It was from awe, respect, and a growing fascination he could not yet name. And somewhere within the calm steel of N, a similar force stirred. The human had survived the test, not only of skill but of trust and courage. And in doing so, he had begun to unlock something in her, a part of her that had long remained untouched by anyone. Curiosity, warmth, and perhaps, for the first time, the stirrings of a connection that transcended protocol and distance. The aftermath of the storm was quiet, but both knew that the calm was temporary. The galaxy was full of threats, but it was also full of opportunities. Opportunities for trust, for understanding, and for the beginning of something neither of them had expected. And in that quiet moment, both Elias and realized they were no longer merely human, and they were something more, something growing, something dangerous and beautiful in its own way. The next morning, the ship was quiet, but the air felt charged with possibility. Elias Ward walked through the corridors with a sense of purpose he had not known before. He had survived the raid, learned from, and endured both physical and cultural tests. Yet more than skill or discipline, he carried something new, understanding. The world was complex, its customs rigid and exacting, but he had glimpsed a path through it, guided by steady hand and piercing insight. He entered the training hall, now familiar yet still intimidating, was already there, adjusting her armor with deliberate care. When she looked up and saw him, her violet eyes softened. No commands, no reprimands, only recognition. Elias felt a surge of confidence, mixed with a nervous thrill. "Today," she said, her voice calm but carrying weight, "you will demonstrate what you have learned. Not just skill, but judgment, respect, and awareness. Show me that you can exist here, not as an outsider, but as someone who can stand beside us." Elias nodded, his pulse steady. He had come a long way, and he knew this moment mattered far more than any test of engineering or combat. It was about trust, about understanding, about bridging two worlds. The exercises began. Elias moved with precision, remembering every lesson from the past days, the careful observation of posture, the subtle rhythm of her movements, the attention to detail she demanded. He mirrored her steps, adapted to her corrections, and even anticipated her subtle shifts. For the first time, he felt a sense of harmony between human instinct and alien discipline. Watched him silently, nodding every improvement, every hesitation overcome. When he faltered, she intervened, not to scold but to guide, her hands brushing his just slightly as she corrected his stance. Elias felt that familiar warmth surge through him. The closeness no longer intimidated him, it motivated him. He wanted to rise to her standards, not out of fear but out of respect and something deeper, unspoken. After hours of practice, they paused. Elias was breathless, muscles aching yet exhilarated. He looked at, seeing not just the commander but the individual behind the armor, disciplined, fierce, and yet capable of subtle vulnerability. "You have improved greatly," she said. "Better than I anticipated. You have learned to observe, to respect, and to endure. These are the qualities of someone who can walk beside the not just survive but belong." Elias swallowed hard. I couldn't have done it without you, Commander. You believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." His gaze lingered, softer than before. She nodded once, her armor catching the light in a way that made her seem almost luminous. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "it is not only your growth that matters. Perhaps it is also what your presence has revealed in me, a willingness to acknowledge trust, connection, and the unexpected." For the first time, Elias understood. Their bond was no longer tentative, no longer limited to teacher and student. It had become mutual, forged through trials, shared danger, and quiet understanding. They had challenged each other, tested boundaries, and yet in the process discovered respect and admiration that transcended species, protocol, and expectation. A soft smile crossed his lips. Then I hope to continue, not just learning, but earning your trust every day. Allowed a small smile in return, a rare, fleeting expression that softened her formidable presence. And I will continue to observe, to guide, to challenge, but also to protect. Her eyes held his, and Elias felt a profound certainty settle in his chest. The hum of the ship, the distant stars beyond the reinforced windows, the quiet rhythm of life aboard the all felt different now. Not just background noise, but a stage for something extraordinary. In that moment, human and stood side by side, not as commander and engineer, not as alien and human, but as equals in understanding, trust, and connection. The bond formed through fear, discipline, and guidance had matured into something unbreakable, a bridge between worlds. Elias exhaled slowly, letting the tension melt. Did the same, her gaze steady yet softer, reflecting a rare satisfaction. Both had changed, both had grown, and both had discovered a truth far greater than either had anticipated. Strength is not only measured by combat or skill, but by the courage to trust, to connect, and to recognize the extraordinary in another. And as they stood together, the vast galaxy outside silent and infinite, Elias realized that he was no longer merely a human among aliens. He was part of something larger, something extraordinary. And beside him, Commander N was no longer untouchable, but a companion in the shared journey ahead. The storm had passed, the bond remained, and the story of human courage, trust, and unexpected connection had reached its powerful, undeniable conclusion.